So my name is Brett Ramey. I'm on the board of Beyond Pesticides. I currently live in Seattle, Washington, in occupied Duwamish territory. And just as I begin, just matter of protocol, I just want to recognize that the original peoples of this land, the Dakota, as well as Ojibwe and Winnebago Ho-Chunks, I know have also spent a good amount of time in here. And I just know that given the content of our talk today, we will be speaking to some degree on indigenous seeds and connections with that, as well as some of the different other varieties that have found themselves in this part of the world as well. So just kind of want to make sure that recognize some of the foundations of the work that many of us are continuing to do in this land here. So with that, we're going to get started. We have with us today, we have Mac, Jack, and Zach. I don't know if you all picked up on that in the agenda. That was not intentional as far as I know. And then we have Nichelle in the back, Beyond Pesticide staff. So thank you, Nichelle, for keeping us everything going with the tech. And after the three panelists, we want to have an opportunity for questions, and then also to potentially hear from some of you all in some of the work you're doing, and we might have some questions for you all as well to kind of bounce around amongst ourselves, depending on if everybody's up for that. But first, wanted to invite Mac Ehrhardt up, and he's the third generation owner of Albert Lee Seeds in Albert Lee, Minnesota, just down the road. I drove through it. And Albert Lee Seed is family-owned and operated seed company providing field seed to farmers in the region since 1923. Mac's grown up in the seed business, been immersed in it sounds like from the very beginning to now, and currently has worked full-time in the seed house since 1991 and has continued into supporting its growth into Albert Lee Seed Organics. And so with that, just wanted to invite Mac up.
All right, thanks a lot. So anyone who can't hear me, it's a pretty small room. So again, Mac Ehrhardt, thanks for having me here today. I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. Go ahead.
It's for the recording. It isn't, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
Can you hear me okay?
Well, I can hear you, but it doesn't sound like you're talking through the mic. But
All right.
because it only goes.
I don't know how to tell. It's got a green light. It says on. Okay. So thanks again for having me here today, and I hope I'm able to provide some information that's useful to you. My part in this is a little outside the normal parameter. I'm going to spend most of my time talking about the conventional seed business, although I am going to touch on organics, which is an important part of our business, and also as a solution to some of the problems that we face. But I think it might be useful for folks in the room to learn about the conventional landscape and what's going on there, and just in terms of percentages and some ways that we might learn that we might actually influence that. To advance slides, do I just hit the down arrow, or is there a clicker?
Should be a side arrow or down.
There we go. So before I do that, it is a third generation family business. About 30 people work there year round. This time of year we have around 50 people. We ship seed across the northern United States, basically from the Dakotas to the Atlantic Ocean. And we're in some ways an old-fashioned seed house in the sense that we sell a wide variety of seeds from corn and soybean seed, obviously, because that's what farmers plant a lot of in Minnesota and Iowa. But we also sell oats and wheat and barley, pasture grasses, cover crop seeds, and grazing grasses as well. And lately we've been actually selling quite a bit of pollinator seed, which is I think one of the bright spots in policy change in the United States. We've been selling a lot of pollinator mixtures for Conservation Reserve Program, which has been a lot of fun for us. Picture of some of us there on the bottom left is my father, George, who I live with now. I live with my dad and my wife and my son. But he's 90 years old now. He's out there in a field of oats that was raised for us, certified seed oats. Probably if you drive around Freeborn County, Minnesota, and you see a field of oats, it's a field of oat seed for us, because there's not a lot of oats that are grown otherwise. And then my brother is next to him, and my cousin once removed, and over on the right is my brother-in-law, myself, and then my daughter Isabel, who at that point was a junior in high school and had absolutely no interest in being there that day, but was nice enough to show up for the picture. And then on the right, this is standard sort of corn company catalog stuff. I'm there with a sales agronomist for our company named Jake, and we're standing in front of a conventional non-GMO hybrid. Okay. Little struggle here. There we go. I was going to mention that, I didn't talk about the organics at all. So about 1998, we started selling certified organic seed. Before there was a national organic program. We didn't have a lot of customers at that point, but we were sort of philosophically inclined to that way of agriculture. So we launched certified organic seed, and last year it made up over 30% of our total business. So we're excited about that. We continue to grow that area of our business. We also, last summer, by mutual agreement, terminated our license with Monsanto, and we now only sell certified organic seed and non-GMO seed. And we're also one of the first companies in the United States to make purity guarantees on our seed. And we're not going to talk a lot about GMOs in here today. I get that. It's just something I wanted to mention because it's an important thing for some consumer groups. We also, this year for the first time, launched this label with our brand, which is called Pollinator Safe. So as I think most of you know, most of the seed corn planted in the United States is treated with a neonicotinoid chemistry. And we wanted to make available to farmers seed that was not treated with neonicotinoids on the conventional side of our business. And so we launched this label. This kind of seed we had made available before, we just never had a formal label for it. And so we started this label. So if a farmer calls up and wants seed without neonicotinoids, we can say, yeah, we have pollinator safe corn. I'm going to tell you this was a pretty tremendous failure. We sold very little seed of this with this label on it this year. I'm hoping that over time demand will grow. And I think there's some things potentially in the consumer landscape that will help change that, and I'll talk about that later. See. So I'm going to talk about, I kind of mentioned what I'm already going to talk about, the conventional seed business. I'm going to talk about where farmers get information and how they make decisions on seed treatments, and where could interventions be made if we want to reduce the use of neonicotinoid seed treatments. And I'm going to talk a little bit about growth in organic farming, and then the Be Better label, which is being launched. Has anybody heard of that? Being launched by Xerces. So that's kind of, I'm pretty excited about that. So again, sort of what the landscape looks like from the conventional, so-called conventional agricultural landscape in the United States. This is based on data based on the United States Department of Agriculture Planning Intentions Report. In this summer, they're estimating that there'll be 90 million acres of corn in the United States and 90 million acres of soybeans planted in the United States. I estimate that something on the order of 95% of the seed that is planted on those 90 million acres of corn on the left-hand side is going to be treated with a package of fungicides and neonicotinoids. There will be some that's a tiny sliver that's planted untreated on organic land, and then there's some seed corn out there available without neonicotinoids on it. On the right, it's a little different because in soybeans, and for reasons I'll talk about in a minute, the treatment is handled differently. And there, I think roughly 30% of the soybean seed that's going to be planted this year will be not treated with anything. And around 40% will be treated with a fungicide and a neonic. Am I getting that right? No. 40% will be treated with just a fungicide, and then about 30% with a fungicide and a neonic. And these are, the estimates on the right are, I think, fairly close. I got some good industry sources that gave me these estimates, so I think those are pretty accurate numbers, although they're not 100% accurate. And just by way of sort of providing some context for this, there was 390 million acres of total cropland in the United States, total tilled cropland. There's something like 900 million acres of farmland, but that includes rangeland and tree farms and things like that. So you can see that corn and soybeans make up the vast majority of those 390 million acres. And also, because when we use these big numbers, sometimes we don't know what they mean. So what does 90 million acres look like? Minnesota, just the land area of Minnesota, or the land, the lakes, the parking lots, the total surface area of Minnesota is about 55 million acres, just to provide context of what 90 million acres might look like. I'm going to skip over the wheat because I think I'm going to run short on time. So about seed treatment on the conventional side of the business, hybrid seed corn and soybean seed have really different treatment paths. And I think if you want to influence policy and think about how farmers think, I think it's important for people to understand that. Almost all hybrid seed corn that a farmer buys is treated before it's even purchased by the farmer. So the seed company is treating that upstream, which is an industry term that they use, which basically just means it's at the facility where this corn is cleaned and graded and packaged. So it gets treated at that point, and the seed company, and I'll talk about why that happens in a few minutes. Opposed to that is soybean seed, which is not treated at the place where it's clean, packaged, and graded. It's usually treated downstream at a co-op, at a seed dealer, or at an elevator. And I think that difference might provide, and we'll talk about that in a minute, might provide a sort of entry point for how people could begin to influence the use of these chemicals. And is that clear, the upstream, downstream? People get that? Okay. So hybrid seed corn, first of all. So why is it, I think it's important to say that second sentence, a farmer rarely has a choice of seed treatments on his or her seed corn. When they buy their seed corn, their DeKalb, whatever, their Pioneer, whatever, they're not choosing a treatment package, they're buying a hybrid. And it's almost always treated with a fungicide and a neonic, as I've mentioned. So why is that? First of all, farmers place a lot of value on their corn acres in the upper Midwest because that's where they make most of their money. And so since they value that highly and their bankers value it highly because farmers are, it's a highly capital intensive activity, right? If you farm 1,000 acres, you have about $8 to $10 million worth of land, probably a couple $1 million worth of equipment. And so farmers are really concerned about hedging their risks. So seed corn companies put it's a little bit of an arms race to put as much seed treatment on that seed as they can get on there to guarantee or to maximize the potential for success of the seed. And the seed corn treatment packages are cheap relative to the ultimate value of that crop, which is another reason why they so often get used. Again, farmers aren't buying seed corn varieties based on what they're treated with at this point. And companies want to make sure that their seed competes well, right? So if you're a seed company and you're not treating your seed, if you're a conventional seed company and you're not treating your seed, you're going to be concerned that maybe the other seed company's varieties are going to beat yours on the farm or in a field trial because they have better seed treatments than you do. Also, I will say that neonic seed treatments seem to be a requirement for rootworm, for genetically engineered corn that's resistant to rootworm, because I've never seen rootworm corn that did not have a neonic on it. And there's quite a bit of rootworm corn sold in the United States. And finally, and this is a seed industry thing that people may not be aware of, treated seed corn can be carried over from one year to the next because it holds its germination. So seed companies are happy to treat the seed upstream, and then if they don't sell it, they can put it in a temperature-controlled warehouse and sell it again the next year. So they're willing to put some money into that seed before they even sell it because they know they'll have 2 or 3 years to sell it. This is an example of if you're a farmer and you're out there shopping online for corn, and you go and you find a DeKalb 4972. This is just a screen grab, which I know you can't read. But if you were to read all the characteristics of that hybrid, there'd be nothing mentioned in there about what it was treated with at all. It's just the maturity, does it stand, what diseases is it resistant to? There's nothing in there about seed treatments at all. Okay, soybean seeds. So again, most soybean seeds are treated after they're purchased by a farmer, and they're treated downstream at a seed dealer or a co-op. And why is that? So first of all, soybeans are seen as producing less income as corn, so farmers are less willing to spend a little extra money on them, so seed companies are trying to sell that seed as cheaply as they can. Treated soybean seed cannot be carried over. It loses its germination, so it has to be dumped every year and sold for animal feed if it's not planted. And so they can't afford to treat seed that has yet to be purchased. Also, habit energy is very strong, as all of you know, and farmers are accustomed to planting treated corn. If I deliver untreated corn to a conventional farmer and it's not pink or green or purple, they're going to think there's something wrong with it, because for generations, literally now, for 2 generations or more, they've been planting corn with its color that's got fungicide on it at a minimum, so they're used to it. Whereas soybeans, they're used to planting soybean seed that's not treated, because it's only in recent years that soybean seeds have started to be treated. It should be mentioned, and maybe it's just completely obvious, that the largest seed companies that sell most of the seed in the United States and around the world are usually biotech companies that also have chemical streams. So Bayer is purchasing Syngenta, Bayer is purchasing Monsanto, ChemChina is purchasing Syngenta, and these are large chemical conglomerates that have a vested interest in selling seed treatment as well because they make money on it. And then the bottom point, you can read for yourself that seed dealers, co-ops, and elevators see seed treatments on soybeans as an add-on that they can make money off of. So I thought it was maybe worthwhile to answer this question. So why do farmers use a neonic on soybean seed when many, not all, but many university studies show extremely limited effectiveness or financial payback on neonics in soybeans, right? So why do they use them? Because they do. So many farmers, and this is true because I talked to them, many farmers are actually convinced that it's worth the money, even though you could show them a university study that says it's not. Why are they convinced of it? Well, there's this insurance mindset that we talked about already. That we see in corn, where they just want to do everything they can to protect that crop because they only get one chance that year to get it right? 2, anecdotal evidence is powerful. I'll skip to 4. Seed companies and dealers are effective at selling soybean seed treatments and have a lot of self-interest in doing so. In the case of soybean seed, they can sell the farmer this package of seed treatments he may or may not understand and make money doing it. So they have a vested interest in doing that, not only because they make money at it, but also because they believe it will make their seed more competitive. And then finally, the last point is one I'm sure that you guys are aware of, that farmers are extremely accustomed to using chemicals to protect their crops. Where do farmers get that information for seed treatment? And this is on corn again, they don't really have much choice. On corn seed treatment, the analogy I use is that seed treatment on corn is like the tires on a car. When you buy a car, you don't buy a car based on what kind of tires it has, right? You're buying a car for other reasons, and the tires are secondary. And the seed treatment in corn is the same way. Soybeans is different. Their number one source of information is their seed dealer or the co-op elevator, or wherever they're buying their seed, because that company, that's the person they're going to for, hey, should I treat my soybean seed? Is it worth it? That's where they get most of their information. They also talk to people they're related to. They might go on something like Ag Talk or AgWeb for information. They do not rely, most farmers unfortunately do not rely on university studies for this kind of information. It's not that they never will pay attention to university studies, but it's definitely not number one choice for them. This is just an example of of what an industry I mean, you guys can't read this because it's just a screen grab, but basically you can see they're going to show them a bar chart where if they use this package of chemicals on their soybeans, it's going to yield more than anything else they can do. Even though we could provide them with bar charts that didn't look like that, that's the one they're going to pay attention to, right? So where could interventions be made? I think economic pressure is very effective. There are policy things that can be done that are being done right now in Minnesota that may work. But I think economic pressure long-term is maybe the best one. And farmers, like all business people, respond to economic incentives. So I'm running out of time, so I'm going to kind of skip ahead. I should say this. So when I mentioned that slide earlier where we had developed this pollinator-safe corn and nobody's buying it, right? And why aren't they buying it? Because they don't have an economic incentive to buy it. There's no reason for them to buy seed that's not treated with a neonic. If we could develop this, if we could build consumer demand for this label, which is being launched by the Xerces Society, and this, by the way, is going to be a process verification. It's not simply the absence of neonicotinoid insecticides. It's a whole farm process verification that will basically certify that an end product, a corn chip on a shelf or a yogurt or whatever it is healthy for pollinators. If we can build that, as much momentum behind that as there is behind this label, I think that could be a significant win, personally, for pollinators. I have a little question mark here, even though there's a butterfly on that label. I'm not convinced that that's really better for pollinators all the time. I mean, there are arguments that could be made in case studies that we can find that show that non-GMO project verified products actually are better for pollinators, but I'm personally aware of several. Corn is a good example, where just because it's non-GMO corn doesn't mean it's better for pollinators, right? So we need to, but if this label has been hugely successful. It went from $0 to $17 billion in 10 years. And if you could build that kind of success around that label, you could make a real difference. And I think I'll stop there because I'm running out of time. So, yeah, so we'll take questions later. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Mac. Next, we have Jack. And Jack Kloppenburg is coming to us from University of Wisconsin-Madison, where he's Professor Emeritus in Department of Community and Environmental Sociology. He is perhaps best known for work on access to and control over plant genetic resources. He's the founder and board member of Open Source Seed Initiative, which I believe we're going to hear a fair amount more about pretty soon here, right?
You are going to hear that.
All right, good. Well, thank you, and join me in welcoming Jack here.
Can you get me to my
Here, I got
presentation? You got that?
I got you.
That mine?
Yep.
Well, good afternoon, citizens. How you doing today? Yeah, we're a little thin on the ground in here. We're a little thin on the ground. I had hoped there would be a few more people, but I think that's characteristic of a generalized misunderstanding of the importance of seed for organics, agriculture, the future of everything, and so on. You know, there's what dude's just been talking about here. Here's some what we call indentured seed from, you remember Ronnie Cummins was talking about indentured farmers, indentured politicians, etc. This indentured seed. And it has 32 patents on it and so on. You can see by the color, it's been treated. That's treated seed. That's what I've been talking about here. Let me send it around. You can take a look at it. But that's how it comes to the farmer. That's fungicide on there, and probably some other things. Not only is it delivering chemicals, but the genetic information that's encoded in that seed is essentially telling farmers what they've got to do to produce that thing effectively and efficiently. And it's been bred in conventional conditions by a narrow set of breeders who essentially work for those big companies. And a narrow set of breeders for a narrow set of companies with a narrow set of objectives, a narrow set of technologies for a narrow set of farmers with a narrow set of results. And we better change that. And we need to free the seed, and that's what the Open Source Seed Initiative is doing. We talk about there is indentured seed, which is passing around now, and freed seed, which is not subject to the same kind of intellectual property restrictions that jar is, and is produced by an entirely different set of breeders and is available through an entirely different set of companies that I want to tell you about. And it is not free seed, it is freed seed. You can do anything you want with it, except restrict other people from doing what they want with it. Now, why is that important? I'll get to that in just a little bit, and why Monsanto doesn't want any part of that stuff. Who are we freeing it from? Well, the companies that were just mentioned here. There were a big six. Now there's going to be a big three as ChemChina picks up Syngenta, as Dow and DuPont merge, as Bayer buys Monsanto. There are 32 patents on that seed that's going around, 20 of them from Monsanto, 10 of them from DuPont, 2 from Bayer. Bayer's got the Liberty Link. That's resistant not only to the glyphosate, Monsanto's line, but also the glufosinate produced. So, and the concentration that is occurring is what for me as a sociologist is most important and problematic. Because that concentration, like we see with airlines and banks and energy companies and information, that consolidation and concentration creates economic power, which translates into cultural power and advertising power and political power and market power and scientific power. Because I can say how many companies are there? Going to be 3 are going to probably control something on the order of 60% of the formal seed market. But they've also got the breeders. Who is it that is defining the genetic content of that seed? Whether the seed has been bred to respond to the soil microorganisms? I don't think so. It's bred in dead soil. It can't do what we've been hearing the plant ought to be able to do. It's bred to respond to fertilizers and herbicides, and really not to be able to be grown effectively without them. That's what you get. Herbicide-resistant corn from DeKalb, owned by Monsanto. So you get consolidation, which creates economic power, which translates into scientific power, because essentially they can buy the technologies that are being used. Are there no other ways that GMO or the advances in genetics might be used sustainably, even organically? Well, we don't know because the bad guys own the technology. So you get consolidation itself, which translates into economic power and political power and legal power. And they're in position to patent what they do, not only the technologies, but the seed itself. And you get consolidation and law mutually reinforcing to create the situation we find ourselves in now. And consolidation goes so far that they don't even need the patents vis-a-vis farmers anymore, really. When there are a few places to be able to buy any alternative, apart from Albert Lee and a couple of others, and I wish you had a larger market, and we'd like to see you have that larger market, but when there's nowhere to go, you cannot even acquire that intention seed without signing first a technology use agreement, which is a fancy way of saying a license. You're renting the seed. It is a limited use license. You don't own anything except the right for a one-time use of the seed. To get that seed, I had to sign these things. I'm probably in violation of that contract now because I'm using that seed for educational purposes instead of the one-time use for a commercial crop. I can't save it. I can't replant it. You sign that license, and you also sign access to your land over. You also sign access to your records over. You sign access to your web materials over. So here's why we need to get out from under the intention seed. And by the way, it's penetrating into vegetables as well. The same legal framework that now soy and maize farmers face in this country is now also coming into sweet corn and into lettuce as well. Both patenting and the license arrangements are already. So if you're buying from Johnny's, you guys are organic gardeners too, right? You're buying from Johnny's, you're buying from High Mowing, an organic seed company. It's organic in that technical sense. But there are also patented materials, patented seed lines that you may be buying that you don't necessarily know about. So transparency is something that we want to work for as well. So I would just say something really quick about GM, which for me is a tool. I think that often we get too much concern. It's a technology like a hammer, and it's valenced in various ways. There are really problematic ways that it inherent in it. But basically, it's a tool. We should be much less concerned with the tool than what it's being used for. And what it's being used for is determined by who gets to use it. That's the problem. What is Enlist is the new one from Dow, which is resistant to 2,4-D in addition to glyphosate. Here's an advertisement that they had on TV for farmers in the upper Midwest. I just pulled that apart of it. That's the image, and this is part of the pattern. And Enlist means you won't have to change the way you farm. And that's basically, farmers are trapped too. Their seed prices have doubled in the last 7 years. They know they're trapped, but they don't see many ways out. And there aren't many options being developed because we don't have the breeders to provide the agronomic and the seed options that we ought to have. So it means you don't have to change. Just keep doing this, and that's the problem with who gets to use the technology. The technology is used not to change things, this very powerful stuff. And CRISPR is a whole other thing that's coming on now. It's being used to enhance the existing system. So where are the breeders? And this is what Nature had a few years ago, a dying breed. They're gone. I thought they were gone. I used to think we were nothing but breeders in Monsanto, Syngenta, and in the third world, millions of breeders, yes, but here in the United States, not so many, or in our institutions of education. Guys like here from Washington State, from Steve Jones. But there are farmer breeders out there too. They're still there. There are indigenous breeders. There are breeders there, but if we don't support them, in our institutions, whether it's University of Montana State, University of Montana, Wisconsin, Michigan State, because what they're doing is being pushed over into a complementary position to corporate breeding. Corporate breeders release the finished varieties. You do the basic research, you do the germplasm enhancement, you do the population analysis, but don't you come near releasing a finished variety that farmers could use. If we allow that to happen, and with the new technologies, my friends in University of Wisconsin or farmers themselves can't use patented material. You can't do research on patented material. So there's no freedom to operate for those breeders. So in worrying about that, some of us in 2012, right here on this campus, as a matter of fact, put together the Open Source Seed Initiative, which was stimulated by, actually, our awareness of the open source initiative in software and the free software movement. That's where this came from. What we did was sit down and said, can we do what they did? Can we put out a license? We moved away from the license and to this pledge. Here's our pledge. This is what we ask breeders who are affiliated with OSSI to agree to. You can read it with me. Read it with me. Ready? There it is on the bottom, there in the box. Open Source Seed Initiative Pledge. Ready? You have the freedom to use these OSSI Pledge seeds in any way you choose. In return, you pledge not to restrict others' use of these seeds or their derivatives by patents or other means, and to include this pledge with any transfer of these seeds or their derivatives. That's an open source pledge. Monsanto wants no part of that. What that means is that you can have these seeds, and this is essentially a contract. This is contract law, not IPR. You can have these seeds, and we're giving you to do anything you want with them except restrict anybody else's use. That's the freedom that you have. And our only restriction is you give that freedom to anybody else with whatever you do with these seeds and the progeny of these seeds and anything you do with that progeny. So any new lines, any breeding you do with that is included in this viral copyleft approach to things. That's what Monsanto wants no part of. We have 36 breeders who have now, and who are they? Well, here's Erwin Goldman, my colleague at University of Wisconsin. But we've only got 6 public breeders. Public breeders are trapped and embedded in those institutions in a variety of ways. But my God, here's Frank Morton and Carol Deppie and Ann Berblinger and Joseph Lofthouse and Andrew Still, young and old, male and female, that I didn't even know were there for the last 30 years. I missed them. 30 years of work on this stuff, and I didn't see them. What else are we missing? These are the people who are producing, not because it is their job necessarily, but because they love doing it. 300 varieties, 375. We just got commitment from the Dwarf Tomato Breeding Project. I don't know if you've heard of it. Certainly you know about determinate tomatoes, right? And they're determinate because they don't grow any higher than that, and because they're essentially bred from machine harvest and for everything being at the same time, and they taste not very good. But the Dwarf Tomato Project, which is based in Australia and the United States, we have 68 new lines that are available through OSSI pledged, that taste good. It may be the new thing. Lots of varieties here. And you can't patent them. Who are our seed companies? Small ones. These are the alternatives. This is what's happening at the margins. High mowing is probably the best known. Wild Garden Seed, Frank Morton's operation. Fedco is part of our operation as well. So what happens is these aren't heirlooms. We're not doing old stuff. We're not doing the biopiracy. We're not appropriating. We're not saying this is ours. New lines, the product of breeding by breeders, independent freelance breeders, who commit to saying, I won't release this in any other way except through this pledge. That seed is provided to, in various ways, multiplication, the seed companies who agree to identify the seed as Aussie, you're saying we want a logo too. We want to have that. We're trademarked. That Aussie is a trademark. Market so people understand what they're buying. Buying freed with a D on it. In addition, because it's not free, there's a market opportunity here that we are trying to support our small seed companies in pursuing. It is organic. They are. Many of them are not certified. They're beyond organic, you might say, like beyond pesticides. But it's organic. They're bred in organic systems. Remember what I was saying here about, and I'll finish off quick. Most organic seed that organic farmers are using to produce organic crop, much of it is conventional varieties grown organically for seed, which is to say that those varieties are bred in traditional systems or our old conventional varieties, because that's what most farmers are used to anyway, in vegetables. I don't know so much about the field crops, probably the same way. What we really want, if you guys want to have, and what are they? They're not bred in the kind of conditions that all these people have been talking about. They're bred for fertilizer. They're bred for, plenty of water. They're bred to have fertilizer. They're bred to be soaked with herbicides and et cetera. They're not bred in an organic system. There's what our breeders are doing. What was that guy that talked about one of the definitions of organic? Site-specific. You know what's site-specific? That's site-specific. So it's the kind of thing that if you want to have an organic agriculture, if you're interested in a site-specific agriculture with many thousands of varieties available all over the country for particular places, and if you want to see that interaction, which seems to me, I didn't realize it was as powerful as it is coming here. I learned a lot. You want to see that soil-plant interaction, you better pay attention to the plant. They are just as different, and they're bred to be different. They're selected for conventional situations. What we need to do is select them within the situations that we see here, that we want to find. So take a look, and what we need is, of course, you guys. Right now, we're nearly all vegetables. We've only got one barley, and we've got, so what we need is a market. Again, here's something that you can do to support these alternative breeders, to support the open system, to support conditions in which Monsanto cannot patent, cannot restrict the use of. Then please buy from our partners. Go to our seeds. You can actually, one of the selection, you can see all our varieties, you can see all our seeds, you can see where to get them. Aussie owns no seed. We're the glue that pulls together a community of interdependent parts consisting of breeders, independent breeders, freelance breeders, organic seed companies, alternative seed companies, and hopefully some consumers. So thank you very much. Please go to our site and support our people. Buy some of their seed. Thank you.
All right, thanks, Jack. Next up, we have Zachary Paige, and Zach is joining us from the White Earth Reservation in northern Minnesota, where he currently serves program coordinator of the Upper Midwest Indigenous Seedkeeper Alliance, which I know we're going to get to hear about, right? And for the last 5 years, he's been the primary organizer for the Indigenous Farming Conference hosted by White Earth Land Recovery Project. Happens in early spring, right?
Yeah, first weekend of March.
Yeah, and is that considered early spring up there still?
Yeah,
Let's get in there. All right. Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, great. Well, with that, just, look forward to hearing what you have to share with us, Zach. Thank you. Oh, okay. Yeah. Do you want me to switch these for you?
No, that's cool.
You can just put it here.
So, how's everyone doing? Long day? Soaking it all up. I'm just gonna open this. So this picture has nothing to do with anything. I just want the picture. We turn one of the lights off in the front of the room? Or is this one? Yeah, that's just a nice picture. Is that okay with these lights off? Or? Get intimate with seed breeding going on. Get organic seed breeding going out in the field, not in the lab. Oh, okay. Sorry. So I just want to say thank you to everybody at the National Pesticide Forum for putting this event on. It's been really great. I'm also honored and humbled to be here with everybody and all these like-minded people such as yourselves, and thank you all for coming to hear us talk. So yeah, my name is Zachary Paige. I've been working for the White Earth Land Recovery Project for the past 5 years. I'm also the Food Sovereignty Coordinator for the White Earth Band of Ojibwe. The mission statement of the White Earth Land Recovery Project is to facilitate the recovery of the original land base of the White Earth Indian Reservation while preserving and restoring traditional practices of sound land stewardship, language fluency, community development, and strengthening our spiritual and cultural heritage. So that wonderful vision came from environmental activist, author, and water protector Winona LaDuke, who some of you might be familiar with. If not, she's got a bunch of books out, really good books. One called, I forget actually, something that, what was her book called? Claim the Sacred, or, oh, Winona, I don't know, if Mary Jo, if you remember. Reclaiming the Sacred, that was it, okay. Reclaiming, and Food is Medicine, yeah. So yeah, those are good books to check out. And also, Bob Shimmick is the current executive director. He spoke this morning, so you all met him. So I'm going to be talking a little bit about the Upper Midwest Indigenous Seed Keepers Network, as well as some of the organic breeding that I've been doing and working on some lines. So I travel around and we go to different conferences. We're at the Organic Seed Alliance conference. That's a really good resource for you guys to check out. They support organic breeding like Jack was talking about, and also Seed Matters. They also are a foundation that supports breeders at the level of, you know, they support individual professors like Bill Tracy, who's working at UW-Madison, and just organic breeding projects around the country. So Seed Matters, Organic Seed Alliance, Cliff Bar Foundation, all good foundations that support our work. So yeah, we go around and talk about seeds. I usually have someone native come up and co-present with me. Diane Wilson from Dreamwild Health is usually someone that comes up and talks. Someone from Lakota or Meskwaki or Ojibwe. But today you're gonna hear about native seed keeping from a Jew. That's what you got. Sorry to say, I asked for permission from the network and they said, that's okay, I'll talk on their behalf. But yes, I'm an outsider to the communities up in White Earth, but I feel honored that Bob and Winona had taken me in and shared this work with me, and also I feel honored to be able to be a part of this great work. I don't want to make light of the work that's going on here, and as my time in White Earth, I've witnessed such profound balance between the culture, tradition, and with the natural environment. And the way that the knowledge system in most Native American tribes and peoples is that the natural environment is a relative. That's how they see it. This is a breathing relative. Seeds are alive, plants are alive, pollinators and bees, they're all alive. And we all came from the same place originally. Even Western science has agreed upon this idea that we are all relatives indeed. So if say you're bringing your 100-year-old grandma to the doctor, and you knew that her mom was also 100 years old, and her mom was, and she's got a good trait for longevity, or good quantitative traits for longevity, and your doctor's looking at that list saying, well, this is the best we've ever seen for this trait. We're gonna take your grandma, we're gonna own her, we're gonna own her traits. And then we're going to give them out to anybody that might want these traits for longevity, maybe military or other uses. I don't know if this is going on in the world, but it's definitely possible at this point. But this is the way the biotech industries are looking at life, basically. They're taking what is something sacred, something that we could call our mothers or fathers or aunts or uncles, something as sacred as that, just to give a metaphor to how they're treating this form of life. And what I've witnessed is the Native American communities just have this balance with that, and I think it's something that we could all learn from a little bit. We've seen the Standing Rock movement and how the land protectors and water protectors that are part of these tribes are rising up, and I think the youth is rising up in a way too. It's part of the movement going on right now. So I think it's something to be watchful for and be mindful of as we continue doing this work. I'm just going to take a water break for a sec. But feel free to read. So I came 5 years ago, 2012, and just jumped right into seed work. Winona kind of had lined up for a position for someone to be doing this work, and I jumped right in. Went to a 5-day crash course, seed saving school at Native Seed Search, some you might have heard of. They do a lot of work with restoring Southwest seeds. So they had this 5-day course. It was run by Bill McDormand at the time. He actually still runs a seed school with the Rocky Mountain Seed Alliance. Still a 5-day course, really great course. You want to learn just pretty much everything about seeds in a really short amount of time, and how to save and how to store and start community seed projects. So when I came back from that to White Earth, we kind of got going, partnering up with the White Earth Tribal and Community College. A lot of the other passionate seed keepers in White Earth community and neighboring tribes. And we just started putting on seed swaps, seed workshops. We had one in Morris University. So we're traveling around, and what I started with organizing the Indigenous Farming Conference, and a bunch of us were there just like sitting in a circle just like this. And people from all over the region, leaders in the food sovereignty movements all over the Turtle Island, were there talking about what was important, what would be important to network together on. So protocols, we wanted to set up protocols much like the OSSI did, but for indigenous seeds as well, to respect the seeds' life. So we actually used the OSSI statement. All we changed was seeds are a gift of life. That's what we added to the beginning of it. And that's on our bag tag of our seed packets with some info on our network. So at that farming conference, we kind of had an on the docks meeting where just 20 of us were sitting around, and we were from all these different states, North Dakota, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Iowa, Michigan. And the reason for forming such a network is to share the risk. Like, there are breeders that do this work in microclimates. We want to adapt the seeds for climate change. And also a lot of the indigenous seeds are rare and maybe don't have a lot of seeds left, and then they're coming from museums and such. So if there's only 50 seeds left, we're going to share the risk by having 5 grow over here and 10 grow over here, and then maybe saving 30 or 35 for the next year. That's another risk. But it also gets that diversity in. Rowan White, who we work with, Aqua Sasne, seed keeper, she's director of Sierra Seeds Co-op in California. She's also the chair of Seed Savers Exchange. And there's a great documentary out right now, Seed, The Untold Story. And I'd recommend that. I think it did play in Minneapolis, saw it a few months ago. It's really, really well done. Same directors as Queen of the Sun, so that was another movie about pollinators. But yeah, so the story that I was getting to with Rowan was that the Mohawk tradition was to have a bunch of seed keepers within the community growing out seed, and then at one point they just grow all that seed together, and that really heightens genetic diversity. And then they go back out and select them for whatever traits they would want, like a red color, yellow, white, blue, green even. So that's the fun of this work too, is we're growing out these really rare or seeds that were from different tribes and doing a lot of rematriation work. We say rematriation instead of repatriation because a lot of the seeds were originally grown by women and actually not allowed to be grown by men. Sometimes men would help out in the field, but yeah, so as we do this work with rematriating the seeds, we're just having fun with keeping the pure lines going. So this is an Ojibwe seed. We're going to keep this going. It's going to be pure, true to type, but then, and open pollinated systems. But then we also want to play around, and that's the fun of it. We want to create a food source. So if these corn lines or if these bean lines or something is inbred a little bit, but we like a few traits, we're going to make it for food. That's the main goal. We want to keep things going, keep things alive for now because a lot of them are on the risk of not being grown out. So we're kind of doing both sides of the work. And as it's been going on for a few years, we're starting to see that second level of making our program sustain through economic system. So one thing that Dream Wild Health is doing is they're growing out 5 acres now of this Ehrhardt corn that they got maybe only a couple hundred seeds of in the beginning. Now we're growing 5 acres. It's going to be a food source. We're going to market it as indigenous grown corn. It tastes way better. We made taste tests with the Ehrhardt corn versus the conventional corn, and by and large, people were liking the Ehrhardt cornbread way better. There's more nutrients. I'm getting a master's in Iowa State, and part of the work that I'm doing there is seeing the nutrient levels of native corns, organic corn, different colored corns, and how that relates to protein and beta carotene. One of the projects I'm involved in, my grad school work with Paul Scott there, is I'm working with Walter Goldstein, and he's breeding for protein, beta carotene, for livestock and both for human fed. And we've been seeing some amazing things. He's doing hybrids, but it's also really, really high nutrient levels in these open pollinated native lines as well. And some of them were up to 14% protein in corn. A lot of the conventional lines that we've been seeing are like 6%, 7%, so double protein is pretty huge. So part of the network is we do these 2-day workshops. We'll hire in educators, native educators. Terry Lynn Brandt, smiling. We're doing the corn hand pollination. You could kind of see the agenda of one of the days. Introductions, seed identification, a lot of hands-on activities. So it's kind of like that 5-day model squished down to a 2-day. It's just more practical for a lot of people coming in. And you still get a ton of knowledge. And we always dedicate a time maybe at the end for a discussion. So we'll sit down with the community that we're going to. The upper seed, I didn't mention the upper seed keepers, indigenous seed keepers network consists of about 14 tribes, organizations, nonprofits, colleges. So we're going to these programs that's funded by Administration of Native American Grant Project. It's coming to an end. And that's what my job was for the last 3 years. I've been managing this project that is called the Upper Midwest Seed Keepers Network. And we're in the midst of kind of transitioning over to Dream Wild Health. So look for Dream Wild Health in the future for this work. They're a little bit more well-suited and have a little bit more capacity. And this was their mission for a very long time. And also, they're better located for the work too. And we're thinking eventually we're going to have a seeds powwow. And we've been talking about that for a while, but it's becoming more of a reality. We're talking to Bush Foundation, and it seems like we're, in the midst of getting a little bit more funding to keep things going. And I'll always be a part of the work as well. So feel free to get in touch with me if you ever have questions. Maybe a little bit more time. Okay. So we work with indigenous chefs. I don't know if you've heard of the Sioux chef, Sean Sherman. He's cooked at our Indigenous Farming Conference for a few years. He's great. He did a Kickstarter campaign. The goal was $100,000. He got like $148,000. It was crazy. So people are really attracted to what's going on in this movement with the native chefs. Austin Barthold, that was at the 24th Street Garden right here in town. I don't know if you've heard of that, but they're doing some pretty great work. I hope they're still at it. I heard that they might not be, but they're part of the WEI, Women's Environmental Initiative, so they might need help. So maybe ask if they need someone to direct that program. But they have an indigenous garden program, and they teach workshops. And we were there 2 years ago doing a seed workshop. We'll be at Shakopee this year doing a seed workshop in July. Just this upcoming Friday, Saturday, we're going to Fort Berthold, which is really exciting because a lot of the seeds corn seeds that are grown out in this region are from Mandan tribe breeders out there. So it's exciting that a lot of the seeds that we were growing are from there. We're going to go there. And Frank Kutka, another organic corn breeder, is going to be speaking, and he's another ally. So a huge part of this work is respecting the seeds through protocol. We've come up with a protocol that we use for getting seeds from collections back home to the tribes that they were from, and it's just a small agreement. It's not too complex. And if you're interested in seeing it, if you know anybody that's interested, let me know. So one of our success stories is through the White Earth Land Recovery Project, my work and Winona's work and a lot of people's work at Dream Wild Health in Shakopee, Wajubi Farm. We constantly got in touch with the people at the Science Museum because Scott Shoemaker is also part of this early on, Miami tribe seed keeper. He was the Native American collections manager, and you could see in these drawers in the museums, there's a lot of seeds, and they're not seen as relatives, they're not seen as life, they're just seen as objects or accessions. So Scott was doing the great work of getting these seeds and growing them out on the museum property first, and that's all they were allowing. But through this relationship, by just constantly getting in touch with them, we kind of broke them down a little bit. And now I kind of made the case this last year, like, well, there's 300 freaking seeds in there, or accessions, and we got to grow these things out, like, now, or else they're just all going to die. So we're working with organic breeders. We have the know-how. We know how. We're prepared to do this. We've got a whole network. These are all native seeds. So there wasn't actually that much resistance, but I kind of wanted there to be. But yeah, they were like, okay. But yeah, so this year we got out Ojibwe Scarlet Runner Bean, 1,000-year-old corn, 900-year-old light blue corn, Ojibwe Spirit Island corn, black Mandan squash. A lot of these varieties are unheard of. There's books written, one called the Upper Midwest, I'm going to say this wrong, but Upper Midwest corn. There's historical books that talk about what corn was grown by the tribes in the Upper Midwest. I'll think of it in a minute. And some of these corn varieties weren't mentioned. So even Frank Kutka, someone that's worked with this corn in this area for 50, I don't know how old he is, but a long time, has never heard of it. So it's pretty exciting. They came back to White Earth in a box, and I started to open that box, and I just felt so much healing power, so much energy from it. I just kind of put it away, and wrote an email to everybody in White Earth that was part of the seed projects, and I said, what do I do? These seeds are back, and they are pretty powerful. And so they suggested we have a ceremony. They knew right away what to do. They're like, oh, we just have to have a ceremony. Bring them to Big Drum, bring a dish of food. They told me what to do. So I'm like, all right. So I've never done that before, so that was pretty exciting to welcome these seeds home. And I showed the person that was leading that drum ceremony the seeds and what they were going to mean, and asked for help to grow them. So the exciting thing happening this year is all the seeds I mentioned plus a few more. We're growing them out at the farm that I live at, White Earth Land Recovery Project up in Round Lake, up in White Earth. And we're going to do hand pollinations for a lot of these lines. A lot of seeds, I got like 30, in a line, or 60 or 90 if I get 3 rows. But basically, you're going to go down the line and do a half sib pollination to get these seeds pure and increase them. And that's the goal. And then year 2, year 3, we could see which ones are going out well, which ones might need work. And like I was saying with Dream Wild Health, they're growing 5 acres out. So that's the goal, to have this economic model sustain their seed programs. There's 2 more minutes or 1 minute? Oh, there you go. So we've got a website and a database that we've built. It's so easy to lose information, especially when you're working with so many different people. We had, I should have brought it, seed catalog, which took almost a year to get everybody's info just in one place. So that was hard enough. And it wasn't a catalog, it was more like a yearbook, because it was a narrative of, and if you're interested, you'd let me know. We had limited copies, but we could do a bigger printing. So there's kind of a front end of this website, and there's a back end. And we're not quite done with it, but the back end is storing your seed data. So how did it grow this year? And everybody in the network could put in as much or as little info as they want. So this was something that I've been working on. Saskatchewan White Flint and Bear Island, they're both corn varieties from our area. Saskatchewan White Flint is about a 55, 60-day corn, grows about this tall. Bear Island Flint grows a little taller, but similarly early season, about 70-day. So I figured Bear Island Flint got to be this big sometime. So I figured my personal goal would be early up Bear Island Flint, keep the same size ear. That was pretty much the only thing. I thought it was pretty multicolored. And Saskatchewan White Flint was more white. It was the whitest color kernel there for the whole ear. So these were slightly bigger than the first Saskatchewan White Flint. This was the F1. I've been growing it out, F2, F3, and just selecting for bigger and bigger ears that are grow for early season. So this is what I'm talking about having fun. So we're growing these out on their own, so they're still pure. You're not just messing with, these seeds. There's a lot of trust that goes into this work with working with tribes. So. But it's also important to have fun and grow something that could actually be used for food. This was that corn that's high protein and high beta carotene. I crossed Dave Christensen, corn breeder out in Montana. I did Peyton mountain corn. Really cool, colorful corn. I'd look it up. 8-row corn, about this tall. It grows in total drought, total mountain conditions. Just so hardy. But Dave also was working on high protein corn. His protein corn was insane. It was like 16% protein when I did that test. So his protein versus crossed with the Juque, which is from Argentina. It's this very orangey colored corn. So I crossed them, did just detasseled basically all the Daves, and this is what came out, and it came out pretty well, I think. So it's all about just being active. If you're working with a community, maybe start a seed swap and start to save your own seeds. A lot of organic farms, sustainable farms, don't save their own seed. And they always give long list of reasons. It's not going to be time effective. But you go down, I was talking to my friend Ryan, and or he was telling me, like, this price of seed is like one of the highest things in his budget right now. So, or his cost. And you can save significant money if you save your seed, and it's not too hard, and seeds are abundant. So people are saying you go out, you protest Trump, walk around and talk and go to conferences. It's all good, but the real resistance is putting the seed in the ground. So I hope some of you come back away with that and maybe save a seed this year. So thanks.
All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and invite Mac, Jack, and Zachary to go ahead and sit up here. And while we're doing that, I just wanted to just to kind of sum up one thing that I heard as a point for all the talks was around access, right? Access to seeds in 3 different ways. And so maybe as you all are getting situated over there, just wanted to kind of pose a question to all of you and invite you, if you'd like, to talk in dyads or two or three, triad. And just because all these conversations around increasing access to seeds all presumes that there's a reason why we want to access or have better access to seed, right? And so I guess the question that I would just ask for you all just to share amongst yourselves as we're just getting organized over here is just what are some of the repercussions of lack of access to seeds, particularly if they are embedded with any sort of cultural or familial significance. And so that's just an invitation for you all just to talk amongst yourselves while we're getting set up.
I'd trade emails with Walter about different things every once in a while.
Yeah, where am I? Right.
Yeah, oh yeah. You want us up here? Yeah, maybe. Or in front of it? Maybe that makes more sense. There you go.
Oh, you did? Or there's some larger.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, then I'll
Done pretty well, I
one
think.
of these up here with you all.
Oh, thanks.
Yeah, I think your guys. I didn't know those were there. Yeah, pass them around. Yeah, okay. Share that stuff. It's a 2-year project, so you got.
It's really that was really exciting. The what do you call it? Remade creation.
Yeah, that's super cool. Yeah. Right? Yeah, they're going home, and it's exciting to see how they grow because these are old.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so just give them a couple minutes, and I'll just ask for a couple report backs, just anything they cut up, and just open up to questions for folks. Is that good? All right. Thanks. And then you all can feel free to all answer questions if they're general or see how it goes. Is that good for you four? Good. All right.
Thanks. I'll tighten it up. So yeah, how do I get more involved with other societies? Really not too much of you guys. Sounds really
Talk if anything we can do to, if you're interested, in fact, that we're meeting as a board, so you can just say you're interested and
What do you normally do? Get involved?
we've got
As a young reader.
we got a board
Yeah.
and we have our breeders and our seed companies. And we right now don't have any sort of systematic communication among everybody. At the next OSGC, the next Organic Seed Growers Conference in Portland, we'll have a day. But we can see what you're interested in doing. If you want to talk, meet, see who our other breeders are, what they're working on, what they're doing. We can put you in touch with people.
Do people like work on each other's projects and stuff like that?
No, not they're all pretty. And they're all pretty independent people. Breeders and farmers here they know each other, many of them, but they're all working on their own stuff.
Yeah.
They're
They still have that mindset, like I'm gonna make the $1 million seed or whatever.
no, the opposite of that. People are doing this. And what was most interesting to me is, as I said, for 30 years I've been working on this stuff. I thought it was Monsanto and the universities. I did not know that the independent, what they like to call themselves, more as a freelance breeder, are out there. They must be there. One of the things that I'd like to know is
All right. Would anybody like to share out some of the things you were talking about? Hi. All right. Can I bring everybody back in?
Yeah.
who have been working
I opened it up. I know. All day listening. I ask you to start talking, then I take it right back. Would anybody like to share back some of the things you were talking about? You don't have to. All right. Just reporting back some of the things you all were sharing, and then we'll do questions. Yeah.
My conversation mate was talking about the difficulty of, sort of echoing what you were saying about farmers not even knowing sometimes or not having a choice about corn seed being treated with neonics. And so this immediate concern of lack of access to seed not treated with neonics out there in the world.
Yeah, anybody else?
I'm a farmer and nutritionist, and we talk a lot about food access, but I think one step before that is seed access. And the narrative of feeding the world, and now doing that increasingly from food deserts, and thinking of how wrong that narrative is and needing to change that narrative, but starting with the seed. And as a person who did not grow up with the reverence for seed, I truly appreciate and will ever follow the leadership of Indigenous people for teaching us, reminding us that we are all related.
All right, thank you all. Now we can jump into questions if you all have any, for any or all of the folks up front.
Hi, I'm Bruce. We've got a question about all the importation of organic seeds from foreign countries because we can't produce enough organic seeds in the United States. It seems kind of crazy. And I don't know if it's financial or politics or, well, probably, I'll let you guys answer, but it just doesn't seem right. And it seems like if the incentives and money are there, why can't we do it? And maybe the Albert Lee seed guy can, I mean, if people really wanted to do more organic seed, how fast can you ramp up to supply that seed?
Sure. So for me, there's sort of two different things. There's a supply of organic grain that's being imported, and then there is some importation of certified organic seed as well. But the big number that I hear, and maybe I'm misunderstanding your question, is that roughly half of the organic corn and half of the organic soybeans, approximately, that get used in the United States for animal feed and other things are coming from foreign countries. But that's not really seed, right? That's just grain. So there is some importation of seed as well, but mostly it's grain. And I think what's happened in the U.S. is that demand has outstripped supply. And so in other countries where labor costs are lower, they've decided to grow organic corn, and the food ingredient suppliers in the United States can buy it more cheaply overseas and bring it in here than they can buy it in the United States. And the market will adjust to that eventually, but it is frustrating for organic farmers to see that, because what's happened is we've imported so much organic corn and organic soybeans is it's brought their prices down to organic farmers, and so they're not making as much money. So I'll stop there.
I wanted to add to that, a lot of the organic seed companies are more like organic seed packing companies because they're not bred with organic conditions. So like a lot of the places that we like too, like high mowing and places like that, they're great on one hand, and sometimes they're bred from organic conditions, but a lot of times they're not, and they are organic because they're not sprayed with pesticides or go through that certification. But I would try to support people like Prairie Brewed Organic Seed Company. They're a small family farm in North Dakota. They breed on location. They grow on location. So if you live in North Dakota, Minnesota, that's the best possible source that you get your seed. They're all certified organic.
I'll just add to that there's actually some pretty good organic breeding work going on at universities now, and some young, really, if you get a chance to go to the Organic Seed Alliance conference, go, because it's really exciting to be there with all the young plant breeders who are jazzed up about this stuff. So we're going to launch a new oat variety this coming year that was developed by Melanie, I can't remember her last name, at South Dakota. She's an oat breeder at South Dakota, and she developed this oat variety under organic conditions specifically for organic farmers. So there is some of that work is starting to get done.
Yeah, and just to add to another level of detail, I'm sure you're all aware of what we're saying with organic breeding, but in case you're not, breeding under conditions where there's not a lot of added implements, it's more of the truly sustainable breeding where these crops are growing and selected for disease resistance, just being there. So they're really, really strong and hardy plants. They're not doped up on, like we were saying, the couch potato plants or whatever. These are a lot of the seeds, the hybrids, or they're on their own, they're couch potato because you can't really even save a hybrid seed unless you want to go through this 8-year wild toad process. Go on a Mr. Toad's wild ride. It could be a fun thing to do. I remember a friend of mine saved she ate watermelon at the store and saved the seed and planted, look at that watermelon, and she had got the watermelon out and she cut it open. It was like weird white foam in it. Just because it was a deleterious allele, it was a recessive trait that just came out, and it's nothing unnatural, but when you make a hybrid, all that crazy stuff will come out. So good to support open pollinated people that save open pollinated seeds. Perhaps the biggest one is a Seed Savers Exchange, pretty close to here.
Yeah, the species are different in how they respond to hybridization, though, and whether, like carrots, you don't get that wild toad stuff, for example. Corn is one thing. So, but some of our breeders find that what they do is what they call dehybridization, in which they take the hybrids, work with them for a while, and stabilize the characteristics that they want. So the potential is there. What we need is more breeders doing more things in whatever way they choose. The trend right now, even though that we do have some young people going into alternative breeding, and we got a little bit of organic stuff going on in the universities, but it really is still just a drop in the bucket. And the center of gravity is going somewhere else. We got to work in our institutions, in our land-grant universities, and get them there. But I think that we've got to go beyond the universities and strengthen what we're finding at the margins, and the farmers and the freelance breeders who are releasing more lines than come out of the university, and probably doing it on way less money. The problem is that often they're really localized, and they are site-specific, and they aren't what the kind of market that Tim might need for establishing, a substantial market that is going to keep your company in business for a while. Somehow we've got to get there eventually. But I really think that we need many more breeders doing more things. And one of our breeders actually is a Harvard PhD written How to Breed Your Own Vegetables, which is a great book. Tells you how to dehybridize. But I think that line of finding more people who are breeding, encouraging them to do that, is great.
One more quick thing to add. I'm getting a master's at Iowa State through a distance program right now. It's a really great program. We have online discussions among the breeders, and I'm like so sore thumb out there. Like I don't even talk about what I'm doing half the time because everybody else in the program is coming from Syngenta, Monsanto. It was great to get that inside scoop of what's going on. I heard about the China merger 2 years ago. I'm like, oh, cool. Maybe keep my mouth shut. But the positive thing is within a lot of the discussions when we're talking about genome analysis and a lot of these really expensive biotech processes, a lot of the young people that work for these companies they're smart. They're working really hard in these places doing the best work they can. And first of all, a lot of the breeding work isn't biotech. A lot of even the work that these companies are doing. But the point I was trying to make is a lot of these processes are really expensive, and a lot of our discussions always kind of end up leading in a direction where is it worth it? Is it worth spending all these millions and millions of dollars on these breeding projects? How much more yield can we possibly get? We've hit the cap. So, and then what are the repercussions? Destroying the soil structure, so. We take all this into account, and these natural discussions I've been having with these young breeders from these companies almost always end up saying well, they don't believe in it. These young breeders don't believe in it at this point, and that's what I've been seeing. They're not buying it.
Same thing, but we're back to consolidation again. The logic isn't what people want to share. It isn't what the young people are seeing, but that's the logic that the corporations are following. And since if another aspect of consolidation is there's no jobs for anyone outside the companies. So you may not like it, but can you afford a breeder? No. Until there are jobs outside. So if we're talking about, there's always got a piece in here in talking about we got to break up the companies and bring them to heel. So.
All right. Does somebody else have?
Okay.
Can I give this to you?
So I'm an entomologist who has been working at Penn State, and so I'm one of the people who has been producing the other bar graphs that show that that neonics rarely have a yield benefit in these crops. But my experience has been, like you pointed out, that many farmers, their sources of information, like university extension, is very low on that list. And so do you have any suggestions, like how could, given the way the system is structured, how could we be more effective at, like we have groups of farmers that we work with who are dropping seed treatments there, and they're trying it. When they try it, it works. Mm-hmm. But how do we reach a broader audience? And
so how do we reach a broader audience? I think for me, the most effective way is to find somebody who speaks their language and is one of them and who they look up to or at least respect. I actually brought it with me because it's one of my favorite things to pass out. There was an article in the New York Times last fall about a woman who's a climate scientist in Texas named Catherine Hayhoe. And she was married for 6 months before she discovered that her husband did not believe in climate change, right? And so...
Whoa.
So, I mean...
He was in denial of the climate denial.
So he was like, and this was a guy with a PhD, and I can't remember what his degree was, right? He's a super smart guy. But he was like, they were in West Texas, and everything was oil, right? And so he had just been raised a certain way, and it was, when people think one way, you can't change their mind by putting a bar graph in front of them. What you need is someone that speaks their language, and she's an evangelical Christian, okay? So she could go into West Texas, speak the language of the people, get their respect, listen to them, which too often doesn't happen. So most of the time we tell people how stupid they are and whatever, right? So instead, listen, talk to them, show them how this actually works on, in this case, how does this work on my farm? Look, I planted soybeans. They didn't have neonics. I got 65 bushels an acre. What did you get? And so for me, it's finding, and seed companies, like big seed companies, use leader farmers to sell seed, right? And so that's the strategy I think that needs to be adopted here, is to find leader farmers to say, you know what, maybe we don't need to use everything all the time.
And I guess a quick concrete follow-up is, like, are you aware of any equivalents to your company in the East? Because...
Well, I mean...
the reason I'm asking is because some of the farmers we are working with are just like having a hard time finding quality seed without neonics on it.
Well, Fedco in Maine, but they're pretty far north. And then in New York, it'd be in Peña, New York, it's Lakeview Organics. They sell, Lakeview Organics in New York sells a fair amount of, and they're a customer of ours, but they also have their own seed that they sell.
Thanks.
This is kind of following the same line, and I'm thinking about something you said, Mac, about your neonicotinoid-free corn seed not being a hot seller, and it made me think about, I was having a conversation with a corn farmer that lives near us, and he happens to be the chair of the House Ag Policy Committee in Minnesota, and he said to me, I think there's something going on with the bees. We're going to continue to study that, but meanwhile, there's none of these seeds available. And so we just can't, go ahead and plant them. So now my follow-up is going to be, well, they actually are available at Albert Lee's Seed, and you should go there. And
and I don't mean to imply we're the only ones. So like our company, our brand, Viking Corn, we decoupled from traded seed companies, so now it's only conventional. So the calls that we most often get for non-neonic treated corn seed are farmers who are renting land from the DNR, and they're going to grow they're going to grow corn on some DNR land, and the DNR won't let them plant neonic treated seed. And they call us, and I say, well, we have non-neonic seed, but it's conventional. You can't spray it with Roundup. And they're like, well, I got to be able to spray it with Roundup, because how else do you farm? And so then I say, well, we don't have it. So then I send them to I know 2 other companies that have Roundup ready corn, not rootworm protected corn, but just Roundup ready corn that doesn't have neonics on it. So it is out there, but you do, for the big farmers, they don't trust the little tiny companies they want to buy from Pioneer or DeKalb, right? So they're not going to trust the smaller seed companies as much. So there will be a problem there, but it is available, I guess is all I'm trying to say.
And I'd say from a farming perspective, that's been 20 years at least of listening to the same channel of Monsanto and me against the world, because consumers are portrayed as being clueless and far removed from the farm, and therefore we have to feed them anyway.
Yeah.
9 billion.
Right, and so there's listening that has to happen there too, right? Like, so we have to, I agree with you that there's a lot of groupthink that goes on in conventional large-scale farming, but we also have to hear what they have to say, if we're really going to affect their behavior, right? So we have to say, well, they really have lived. Some of them have lived there for 3 generations, and they want to pass their farm on to their kids. So they do think that they are doing the right thing. So we have to respect that and work with them, right? And say, okay, I understand that you're concerned about the land and that you're a conservationist, but I think we can do better. And there's a way to farm and make money without having a negative impact on pollinators, right? Like, does that make sense?
It does, but I've been there 5 generations too, and I don't know why I think so differently.
Right.
And how I'm dismissed like somebody who accidentally fell off a bus.
Well, do you farm?
Yes.
Okay, so then you're in a position where you're in a great position where you should be able to, it seems like armed with enough information and enough listening skills, you're in a place where you could say, you know what, non-neonic treated seed is available. Here's Iowa State study number 1, University of Wisconsin number 2. It seems like that's a conversation that could happen.
But the conversation that we have instead on the fence line is that since I'm organic, is that
Oh, okay.
I am,
That's it. That's
we need to say,
yeah.
you are difficult to farm around, we farm in the acceptable way.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is, by a leader, you're going to need to find a conventional farmer, right, or a somewhat conventional farmer that's willing to farm without neonics in order to convince, the 3,600 acre farmer, 2,400 acre farmer that it's possible to do it. Not that I don't mean any disrespect at all, because I'm a big believer in organic farming, but most of the organic farmers that I work with aren't going to be able to convince their neighbors not to use neonics.
I wonder if some of the health effects will start to, because they're very widespread in farm country.
Yeah, as I get older, I get less and less convinced that facts alone are going to change minds. We have this idea that we're rational animals, and we're not. Well, we are in one way, but a lot of the ways that we make decisions are less rational than we think they are, and that's why I think it's important to figure out other ways to build that trust and have the conversation around. I respect the way that in the case of this conventional farmer, I respect the way that you farm, and have that conversation around building trust, and then leading it in a different direction, rather than saying, here's a chart showing that it causes cancer, and here's another chart showing that you don't need it. It just doesn't seem to be working. Not that facts aren't necessary. Don't misunderstand. Not that the facts aren't necessary, but facts alone aren't gonna do it. We just had an election, if you guys remember.
Here, I'm gonna wrap us up. Here, Zach, just one last quick comment, and I'm gonna wrap us up to get us to.
From a different point of view on a similar question, when people ask you, I'm sure this has happened in your life and it will happen in the future. How are we going to feed 9 billion people from your small organic garden? I would suggest a few answers to that, and I think just by educating people that have that mindset, is important. So one thing you could say to like, how are you going to feed 9 billion people on your, organic system that, doesn't yield as well or whatnot? Number one is, for thousands and thousands of years, people have been growing locally adapted food, saving and breeding. So that's sustained the test of time. And then the arrogance behind that question alone. Who would want to be responsible for feeding 9 billion people? And that's like the biggest arrogant statement I've ever heard, I think. So I think, I don't know, if I'm ending this again, I would say the resistance is, I think, doing the work as much as you can. And if you really can't get out there and put some seeds in the ground yourself, try to support, work that, some of the work that we might be doing or some of the work you see worthwhile. Because I'm thinking, someone said the other day, like, what if we just gave you $1 million, or like all the organic breeders? What if people just started supporting the organic breeders, the 36 up there? I think things would start to change pretty fast because we've got a lot of the facts, but I think also people are getting more in tune to like the nutrition and the flavor of the food and supporting diversity.
I mean, it irritates me and really bothers me when people say we have to feed the world. And you're exactly right. And I try to say that that's a narrative that has to be destabilized and eliminated. It shouldn't be how do we feed the world. It's how can we feed each other and how can people feed themselves. And for the most part around the world, much of what goes on in corn and soy, I mean, 70% is that going to animals in the first place. And so it's indirect. But the problem with hunger around the world is that people simply don't have resources to feed themselves, which is to say they don't have the land. And you see that narrative that comes out in golden rice and so on and whatnot. And it really is one that is worth being challenged all the time. How can people feed themselves? So,
you might also point out that half the corn in Iowa goes to an ethanol plant.
Yeah.
Really that much. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, that's a little simplistic because then some of the byproduct goes to an animal ultimately too.
Yeah. So between feeding our animals and feeding our cars, we're not feeding that many people anyway.
Yeah, and that kind of gets back to one of the core terms in the list of the workshop is around seed sovereignty, right? And was that inherent right for us to have access to culturally significant seeds, familial significant seeds that are of and by us, for us. And that's kind of the basic premise that I see around some of the significance that you all are doing in your own unique ways. So I just wanted to thank you all for the work you're doing to promote and protect seed diversity and all the things that come along with that. And just also wanted to acknowledge and thank everybody in here. I know you are all doing similar work in your own way and would love to be able to know what everybody is doing. And hopefully we can find time, if we haven't already had an opportunity, to talk to each other. And I just wanted to wrap up, because I'm seeing all this talk of corn, and I just want to wrap up by sharing some of my corn from back home. And it was about this time, about 5 years ago, and I was talking with my friend Ruben. It's up on the Iowa Reservation, northeast Kansas, right on the Missouri River. And he was saying, like, somebody was coming to him and they were all excited to plant, and they said, no, Ruben, how do we plant? I got my rows dug out, like I'm ready to go. And he's like, well, yeah, you can do that. You can plant in rows. And I don't know if you remember, but about 80 years ago, when the boarding schools were set up, that's exactly what they did. They put us in rows in school. They taught us to plant in rows. And so then that automatically put us in this path of linear thinking, of thinking in rows, right? And so he suggested to her that if she wanted to do that, great. There's a lot of reasons to plant in rows, but the metaphor behind it is that pre-contact, pre-colonization, we planted our corn in mounds together, and the idea with that is that you're stronger when you're planted together. When the windstorm comes through, if you're in a cluster of 5 or 6 seeds, 5 or 6 plants standing together, you're less likely to get knocked down. Whereas if we're in these single file rows doing our own individual thing, then you can come through and just take us out one at a time. And so just hearing what you all are doing, I think of that same teaching, that in all of our own ways, we are our own seeds, we have our own identity as our own seeds, but then when we're planted together in these clusters, then we're stronger and more resilient and better for it. So just thank you all for sharing the ways that you did, and just look forward to seeing what keeps coming from this part of the world. It's good work. Thank you.